My name is Donna.
And I'm Deanne.
And we're just hanging out in the kitchen here today. We want to bring you some ideas for food and education. But to get started, let's play a little word game. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I want you to say the first word that comes to mind when I give you a word.
Okay.
Sugar.
Flour.
Eggs.
Bacon.
Oh, yum. Mixing bowl.
Beaters.
Okay. How about cookies?
Calories.
I like that one. Kitchen.
Baking.
Okay, last one. Children.
Disaster.
Oh. Okay. So what are some of the words that you think of when you think of kitchen products, things that you use when you bake or you cook? Hopefully it's not like Deanne's last word, disaster or chaos or mess. My hope is that after you see this video, you will be ready to jump into the kitchen with your children and be enthusiastic about some food projects in your curriculum. A multisensory approach is important in education because children don't all learn the same way. We incorporate seeing, doing, hearing, but what about tasting and smelling? So there are families, however, that incorporate recipes and food ideas into their curriculum, right?
Absolutely.
You did.
Absolutely.
And I know I did it with my kids when they were younger. So cooking or using food in your different subject areas can add a different dimension to what your children are learning. It also helps them to remember, because sometimes, do you ever have that feeling when you smell something and you go, oh, that reminds me of...
Absolutely.
And the same thing, when you taste something that's a little bit different, you go, oh, I remember when I was a kid, my mom made whatever it is. But you're only limited by your imagination. There are a lot of benefits to adding food and cooking to your curriculum, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, you did a lot of unit studies.
We did. We used a lot of unit studies over the years, and we found that adding the cooking dimension was a great way that I could work with the different age groups of kids. At the same time, I was able to let them learn some math skills through measuring and troubleshooting when they would mismeasure and we had to fix a recipe.
And where else do you get an activity where you're doing a lot of different things? It's not just math. It's language arts skills. It's the reading. It's higher order thinking, because I may have to change a recipe to make it fit exactly what it is I want to do. So you could use it in science.
Absolutely.
You can use it in history to learn about the different cultures and give your children a different cultural experience than just what they're used to being around them every day. We're in the Midwest. We're pretty used to certain kinds of foods. It's kind of fun to get into the history and the cultural aspects of different kinds of food, which we'll talk a little bit about today.
And it helps our kids be more brave at trying things that wouldn't normally try. You know, introducing the different flavors or the different textures from a land not our own helps them go, that wasn't so bad after all, or, allow them to go, I'll never eat that again.
Exactly. Not to mention it teaches some good life skills.
Right.
How many adults do you know can't cook?
Truth.
A lot of times it's because they were never taught when they were younger. It wasn't unusual in our house to have the kids in the kitchen with me at any given time, whatever it might have been. And a lot of times they got to pick what we were going to make, which was really fun. Which brings us to the next point, which is fun. Sometimes it's just fun to add food to your curriculum.
Absolutely.
It doesn't always have to be educational. This is educational by way of default, I think. Beside, I think the last one, building family memories.
Absolutely.
And you've told me stories about things that you've done with your family in the kitchen.
Yep.
And I know I have a lot of good memories with my children. And to this day, my son, who's 32, will say things like, Mom, you remember that time that you taught me to make homemade pizza? You remember when you bought me my first cookbook? And his wife definitely appreciates the fact that he can cook. Now, the first subject that we want to talk about today is science. One of my favorite subjects. I used to teach science, and these are some projects that I used to do with the kids in my classroom, and I would do them with my own kids at home. The first one is making an edible cell. Now, we're going to show you the easy version of this today. The only requisite for an edible cell is that everything in it must be edible. You
That's
can't
easy.
be sticking marbles in it.
That's easy.
So we're going to start with a bowl of Jell-O. The Jell-O is the cell itself. The bowl is the cell membrane. And then we want to add the parts to it. Now, if you have your kids do this, the really fun thing is they decorate it themselves. They put the parts of the cell together. Okay, so in this case, we're going to use a gumball for the cell nucleus. It's about to pop back up. Be sure it's pushed down far enough that it won't jump back out for you. Now, and a gumball is hollow, so you can even talk to the kids about what's contained in a nucleus. Now, there are other parts to the cell. We have food vacuoles, which we could use any of the things that we have here on the plate, but in this case, we're going to use mandarin oranges.
I'll do another
Those
one.
are the food vacuoles. We could use pieces of gummy worms. You can use gummy bears. You can use M&Ms. Those can represent the mitochondrial DNA. We can use them to represent all the different parts of a cell, depending on whether you're making a plant cell or an animal cell. The fun part is when you're finished with this, I used to have a whole classroom of kids do this, and at the end, we got to have a party, and you got to eat the cell that you brought. We've had everything from a big cookie that's been decorated to look like the cell. We've even had some that you didn't want to eat, made from cooked spaghetti with a cream-filled cupcake in the middle of it for the nucleus, and grapes for the vacuoles. It wasn't as tasty as it sounds. So this is just a fun idea, easy to do, and if you don't want the mess of making the Jell-O, which you can look on the handout, we give step-by-step how to do this. But you can buy little Jell-O cups if you're doing it with a co-op group, or maybe you don't want the mess at your house, and let your kids decorate it the way they can. Now the catch is they don't get to eat it until they can tell you what all of the parts represent. So there is an educational factor in here as well. Now this is a fun one. This is another one that's also good for eating when you're finished. I kind of like this one. This is a demonstration of the layers of the earth. You can't see the core, it's in the bottom, and I don't want to tilt it, but there's a core down here, and then you can see the mantle, then you have the bedrock, you have the clay layer, and then you have the topsoil. And topsoil is where life happens, so we have some worms in the top of it there. This one's pretty easy to do too. You can buy most of the stuff that you have from your local grocery store. In this case, the only thing that you really have to mix up is red food coloring and whipped topping. And red food coloring, whipped topping is for your mantle layer. So while she's doing that, we'll get started here. We're going to use a gumball for the core of the earth. Be sure when you talk about this with your kids that you're telling them what each part represents and what that part does. So we have the core, which is a very dense liquid. In this case, we're just using the gumball to represent it. And then over the core of the earth, we have the mantle layer, which is represented by our red whipped topping. Then on top of the mantle, we have the bedrock. This bedrock is made up of a mixture of chocolate chips and peanut butter chips, raisins. This has some little Heath chips. Use what you have in your pantry. This is what I had in my pantry. So, and maybe your kids might not like some of this stuff. So pick things that you think they will like. Maybe they're not raisin eaters and you don't want to put those in there. Maybe you want to put in some dried cranberries instead. Again, limited only by your imagination. So the bedrock isn't solid. It's something you explain to the kids. That's what allows the magma, the mantle, to move underneath the bedrock. Then we have the clay layer. This is graham cracker crumbs, and yes, I keep these in my pantry all ready to go because I like to bake cheesecakes and pies, and so I always have some graham crackers ready to go in my pantry. This is just Oreo cookie crumbs. Basically throw your Oreo cookies into a food processor and you have them. Now mine looks a little more gravelly This is the topsoil. Mine has, the recipe will tell you to use Oreo crumbs. I put some ground up nuts in it just to give it that little bit of dirt kind of look to it. You can do that if you want to. You don't have to. Topsoil is what we see every day. This is where everything grows. And so because it's where life is, it's where we can decorate it up a little bit. You can put some gummy worms down in it if you want to. I just cut these gummy worms up because they're a little bit long to stick in there. Or you can stick some other like green coconut on there to represent grass or whatever your kids like to eat. But when you're finished, they have this layered model of the core, the mantle, the bedrock, the clay, and the topsoil. So an edible model, nothing more fun than getting to eat your science lesson.
That's awesome.
Welcome back to our kitchen. We've talked about science. Now let's talk a little bit about math. Now this is something that I did for my children when they were younger. My son was having trouble with fractions, and we were having pizza one day for lunch. So we baked up the pizza, and I started to cut it. And we talked about fractions because he understands food and he understands pizza. So I have one whole pizza that I cut in 2 halves. So 2 halves made one whole pizza. And then, but because there were more of us eating than just 2 people, did you do this with your kids too?
Absolutely, we did.
Then if I cut it again, now I have 4 pieces, so each piece is 1/4, and if I have 4/4, I have one whole pizza. You can use this not just to teach them about basic fractions, but you can teach them about multiplying and dividing fractions with this. It doesn't have to be done just with pizza. We can have, like, if you have pretzels in your kitchen, or you have peanuts in your kitchen, or you have cheese crackers in your kitchen, your kids can take them, put them into piles. You can use them for counting. You can sort them. I could look and see how many different groups, how many people do I have in the room. And so I could divide what I have into 4 equal groups. And it's a good counting practice for them. Oh, look, I don't have enough to have 4 equal groups. Somebody's going to get shortchanged. But this is how kids can learn about doing fractions and counting and sequencing and grouping. So you can use this with just about any age group of child. Another thing that you can do for math, and it's something that moms do every day in the kitchen, cooks do every day, chefs do every day if you watch food TV or any of those. We use measuring cups. Measuring is math. And so we have this fun recipe that you can do here. It's just a trail mix, pretty simple. You can do, we actually have a recipe that you're going to find on your handout that you can follow. If you don't want to follow the handout recipe, you do whatever you want. You can add things that you like, take out the things that you don't like. But this recipe allows kids to measure and make their own snack. So we have granola, and we use, okay, put your math thinking caps on, 1 1/4 cups of granola plus 3/4 cups of granola is
2 cups.
Very good. So 2 cups of granola. And then we have dry roasted peanuts. Now you'll notice we're putting it into a plastic bag, not a bowl. And I believe the recipe probably says to do it in a bowl. I like doing it in a plastic bag because when we're all finished, all we have to do is zip it shut, shake it up, and our trail mix is all mixed up. And I didn't have to dirty a bowl to do it. It's already in my storage bag. So perfect. I need 1 1/2 cups of dry roasted peanuts. Notice I didn't make you do the math this time. And let's say you don't want peanuts. Maybe you want almonds. Maybe you want pecans. Maybe you want cashews. I'm not a cashew eater, so you'd probably never find that in my trail mix. Okay, we need 1 cup of pretzel sticks. Don't use my counting ones here. Those are for my snack later. Now, pretzel sticks can be a little bit awkward just because they're long and spindly. If you want to break them in half to do it, that's fine. We also have cheese crackers. 1 cup of cheese crackers. You can use the square ones if you want. You can use the bigger fish if you want. You can use these little tiny ones. Maybe you don't like cheese crackers. Maybe you like some other flavor. Get that and throw it in as well. Then 3/4 of a cup of raisins. Maybe you don't like raisins. Maybe you like cranberries that are dried, or maybe you like dried blueberries, or maybe you like some other kind of dried fruit. Maybe you don't like dried fruit at all, so don't put it in. Now it's all finished. All you have to do, let the kids shake it up. And you have snack time, or if you're going on an outing, you've already got your snack made up. So kind of a fun recipe. Ooh, yum. I'll go straight for the pretzel sticks. A fun thing to do to take things on a trip with you, or just to have for snack time that day. Now I will say, this may not be a good activity for your little ones. When my kids were little, measuring cups were always around. I had mine, they had theirs. And you can let little ones take measuring cups, measuring spoons, play with them in the water. Your kids ever stand up at the kitchen sink and play with, like dip the water back and forth, so they know that, like, how many of these can I pour into this?
I was the mom that when it was cold out in the winter, I bought a little baby pool that sat in the middle of our dining room with towels underneath it, and I let them water play all winter long.
Perfect. That's perfect. So let them play with measuring cups. It gives them the idea. It's a visual, for some spatial visual kinds of reasoning. And it also, you can play with them in a sandbox. My kids played with, I got them a set to play with out in the sandbox. So it wasn't always just in the house, not in the kitchen. And many years ago, before my children, I taught preschool, and we had a sand and water table. So we did this with rice, we did this with cornmeal, and it was always measuring cups, because kids could practice measuring even before they're old enough to understand what all of those fraction numbers mean.
A natural extension of cooking in the classroom is to use cooking as part of your history, your geography, and even your cultural studies. One thing my family did when my children were younger was we made a United States map out of sugar cookie dough. This is really something easy to do. You can either buy prepackaged sugar dough, or you can use your own recipe, but spread it out onto your cookie sheet, cut out the edge of the United States, and then after you bake it, then you will decorate it. For us, we use blue frosting for the rivers and for the Great Lakes. We incorporated chocolate candies for the mountaintops, chocolate chips as the smaller hillsides and some of the lower mountains. We used yellow sugar as our desert area, and then I took coconut and dyed it green in order to reflect grass, or just left some of it white to reflect snow. This was very easy for my children to do. They actually did this when they were younger, although my husband did this weekend for me. You may find with the sugar, some of the sugars you'll have to make just a thin frosting from scratch to use as a glue to hold them on, especially if you want to hold your pan up like this, like I do. But those are just some things that we did. Donna, I know, has some great ideas as well.
That sounds like a fun project. This is something I would have done with my kids when they were little. We would have turned it into something else. We didn't do the United States, though. When you talk about history and culture, a lot of people start with ancient history. And when you talk about ancient history, I'm going to move your map up just a little bit here. When you talk about ancient history, a lot of times you're talking about the Middle East, because that's where it all began. And you might introduce your children to different kinds of foods. Maybe it's not something that you've made. Maybe it's just something that you've purchased. These are some examples of foods that we eat at our house. This is a white cheese. That's a little bit salty, and black sesame seeds on the back, or on the outside of it, and it's so good, but different than the regular cheeses that you buy in the grocery stores. Falafel. Some of you may already eat falafel. This is something that's become very popular at my house. My children are grown now.
What is falafel?
I've
never heard of it.
Falafel that's a really good question. Falafel is made of ground chickpeas.
Ooh.
It comes in a can like this. It actually says chickpeas on it. Some of you might know them as garbanzo beans. But this is what they look like.
Okay.
In a can. I talked to a lady just the other day who makes these, and she starts out with dried chickpeas, soaks them overnight, then grinds them, puts them with certain seasonings, and then makes them into these falafel balls that are deep fried. You can eat them in sandwiches. I like to eat them by themselves. It's a little more, I don't know. I don't want all the other stuff with it. It's really good. Figs might be something that your children have never had, and they're just a really good treat. They're nice and sweet. Kind of an acquired taste. You may or may not like them, but let your kids try. It's always fun when they're little to try something they've never tried before. And then this is something called mamoul. Mamoul is it's a cookie, almost crust on the outside with a date filling on the inside. You can get them with other fillings, but this is the date filling. And if you don't like dates, it's probably not going to appeal to you, but they're a good, just a nice sweet filling. I actually eat those for breakfast in the morning, just because they are new for us. Sometimes when you try something at home, like mom and dad will say, we're going to have this for supper, and the kids go, I don't like that, I don't want to try it. That's not exclusive to kids. Adults get like that too. And
Absolutely.
And I know my husband wouldn't eat a lot of these things, but we were fortunate enough to get to go on a trip to Israel this year. He tried all of these foods firsthand, and within the right setting and the right seasonings, and someone who cooks it on a daily basis, they know what they're doing. And my husband now, these are actually out of our refrigerator and off our pantry. We make regular trips to the Mediterranean market in a town near us. So you can try cultural foods that you might not try otherwise. Just shop somewhere other than your regular grocery store. This is couscous. Not something that I ever was fond of, and tried it when we were in Israel. I always thought couscous was a grain. Shows you what I know. It's just semolina wheat. This has a seasoning on it that's very traditional in the Middle East, and this has become a side dish at our house. And it comes in different sizes. This is a homemade hummus. Now, a lot of you may already eat hummus, but you may not realize how easy it is to make. All you do is grind your chickpeas, and you'll have a recipe for this on your handout.
Good.
Grind your chickpeas, mix it with something called tahini paste. This is a sesame paste.
Okay.
Not what you expect, is it? A little bit of lemon juice, a clove of garlic. We got our garlic here. This actually came from our Mediterranean market as well. After you mix all of that up, put it in your food processor, sprinkle it with a little bit of paprika, drizzle it with olive oil, and you've got hummus. You're ready to go.
Delicious.
Oh, I wish I had a chip here for you
I
to
do
try
too.
it.
I wish you did too.
Oh no, watch her. She'll be doing it later in the video. Olives, something I never ate a lot of. Now they're a common staple in my fridge. They're not the regular olives you buy in the store. That's what I'm saying. Just because your kids don't like what you get from the grocery store doesn't mean they may not like it. It might be something different. And I was told a really interesting fact the other day that your taste buds change every 4 years. So just because you don't like it now doesn't mean you won't like it later. This is an olive spread. So I'm just lots of things that you can let them try. I looked at these. This is something that I used to eat as a kid and didn't like it. I would try it. Any guesses what it is?
No idea.
This is a persimmon.
Oh.
And when I was a child, my mom would get us to try. I was, those things were terrible. But absolutely love persimmons now when they're nice and fresh, and when they're ripe. You want to make sure they're nice and ripe, or your children will never try them again.
How do you know they're ripe?
It has to be mushy.
Mushy.
It gets kind of mushy, and you'll go, they look like they're overripe. They are a little bit. But if they're not, they'll be sour. You won't like them. Any guesses?
No.
It's a mango.
Oh.
Not what we typically think of when we think
Right.
of a mango, but again, something that, get your kids to try it.
Right.
Just something different that maybe they've never tried before. So introducing foods that maybe you didn't cook into your history, your study of different time periods or different areas. Maybe you're studying the Latin American countries, maybe you're studying Mexico, maybe you're studying Italy. Lots of other countries, Asian cultures. Introduce the food And then when kids are given the opportunity to try those things in a different setting, they might not turn up their noses and go, ew, really? There's a natural overlap between history and Bible. A lot of the Bible events took place in ancient times. So some of the things that we showed you that you could do in history or culture are things that you can also do in Bible. You can have a cultural feast. I used the books Ancient Egyptians and Their Neighbors and Ancient Israelites and Their Neighbors and took recipes and ideas out of them to have a feast in my 7th grade class one year after we studied the Judges. One of the feasts that you can do that's very specific to the Jewish culture is to set up a Seder Plate. Teach the kids about the history of Jerusalem, of the Jewish people, through the items that are found on the Seder Plate. Now, I don't want to mess this up, so I'm going to read to you what each item is on the plate while Deanne shows you which ones they are. The first is the karpas, which can be either celery or a boiled potato. This dates back to the 1st and the 2nd century in Jerusalem. And it was involved beginning a formal meal by dipping those vegetables into salt water. That salt water represented the tears of the Jewish people from their years of enslavement. Next, we have the zeroa, which can be either chicken wings or a lamb shank bone. If you're a vegetarian, you can use a roasted beet, which I found very interesting. It signified the sacrifice that was made, and then the blood was put onto the doorposts to save their children, because the Bible said that the blood would be a sign on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. So you have kind of a choice of what you want to put on the plate there. The third thing is the beitza, or the boiled egg. 2 different interpretations of this one. It can be a symbol of fertility, and the other is a symbol of mourning. In which case, if it is used as a symbol of mourning, it's the loss of the 2 temples where they can no longer go and make their sacrifices. The fourth thing on the plate is something a little bit unusual, and this is the herosis. This is a mixture of apples and nuts and cinnamon and sweet red wine. Looks like a mortar that the Jewish children would have used when they were enslaved in Egypt to build the temples. The last 2 items are both the herbs. So we have the meror, which is the bitter herbs that are used along with, they eat it like a Hillel sandwich. They'll take matzah bread and they can eat it between. Then there's also the last vegetable, which is called the hazeros, which is another bitter vegetable, and it symbolizes the bitterness of the slavery during the time that they were in Egypt. In our case, we've used romaine lettuce. I know there are other items that you can use, but in this case, this is a very common item that's used. Some Jewish people will set a small bowl of salt water next to it or beside it, sometimes on the plate, depending on the items that they have on the plate. This is a great way to teach kids the Jewish history, the idea that each thing symbolizes something that they can remember. So I want to bring a couple of my special friends in to help with this section of the video. Come on in. Hi there. So this is Ramsey. And this is Cheyenne, 2 of my really special friends here at Rainbow Resource Center. Can you say hi to everybody? Nice job. Thank you. This is a fun project that you can do, and you guys are just the right size to get to do this. This is called resurrection rolls. Can you see my resurrection rolls here? Uh-huh. This is a fun project at Easter.
Is Jesus already inside them?
Well, there was a marshmallow in there, and it's gone. Can we tell the story about it?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, in front of you, you have a piece of crescent roll dough, just like I made these. To make my resurrection rolls, I used a piece of crescent roll dough, just like you have on your piece of paper in front of you. And this represents the cloth that they wrapped Jesus' body in before they buried him. After they took him off the cross, they got ready to wrap him up. And I used a marshmallow to represent Jesus' body. Do you see what's on that marshmallow? Cinnamon. And what else?
Sugar.
And sugar. Now, how do you think I got that cinnamon and sugar to stick on there?
Glue.
Butter. Butter was like glue.
Ramsey would not eat glue.
So we rolled the marshmallow in butter, and the butter represents the oil that they would have wrapped on Jesus' body after he died.
The spices.
The cinnamon and sugar are the spices, exactly, that they would have rubbed on Jesus' body. And then they would have taken Jesus' body and they would have wrapped it in the cloth. So that's what we're doing with our roll here. Can you do that? You wrap that dough around your marshmallow just like they wrapped Jesus' body in the linen cloth. Nice job. Make sure you get that marshmallow all wrapped up and pinch it shut so that you can't see anything inside of it. And after these are all finished, you put them on a pan and you pop them in the oven to bake them at the temperature that's on the crescent roll can.
But why do they put things on top of their head?
Why do they put what on top of their head?
Why do they put the stuff on the cloth on their head too?
That's a good question. It's just another cloth. They do one cloth that covers the whole body and one that covers the head. We're just doing
Even
one
if they
for the
have
whole
glasses
body.
on?
Well, they wouldn't have had glasses on when they get ready to bury them, but that's a good question. And so then we pop them in the oven, we bake them. Now, the oven is like the tomb. You put the pan in there with your rolls on them, and then you take that pan out of the oven and you let them set and cool off a little bit, and then you cut them open. Where did the body go?
Lost.
It's gone. It's gone. Where did Jesus' body go?
He went out.
He rose, exactly. He rose from the tomb. And after he rose, do you remember what they found inside the tomb?
An angel?
An angel was standing there and said, "Why are you looking here?" Because he's not here anymore. He has risen from the dead. And what was left inside the tomb? Do you remember?
Angel.
The angel was standing there, you are right. But the cloth was left there, and the spices were inside the cloth, but the body was gone. And when you bake this in the oven, this is what you'll get. You'll get the marshmallow is gone. Just like Jesus' body was gone. But what's left? We have the dough, right? Which was
And
like
the
the cloth.
cinnamon.
And the cinnamon and the sugar. And it was like the spices that were rubbed on Jesus' body. This is a really good picture for your kids of, or visual reminder of the resurrection and how Jesus rose from the dead. But the best part is when it's finished, you get to eat them. Language arts is no exception to the food rule, and it's pretty easy to incorporate into your curriculum. We all read stories, it's kind of fun, and you find something interesting in it that you might want to try. And I know when my kids were younger, we read a lot of the Little House on the Prairie stories, and one of the recipes that you'll find in there, one of the things that they mention is something called corn dodgers, and we've given you this recipe on the handout. Now, when I was a kid, we didn't call them corn dodgers. My mom used to make these for us, and we called them fried cornbread. It was basically a shortcut to doing baked cornbread. So if you want to try something a little bit different, you're reading along in the Little House books, try one of the recipes that they have in there. There's actually a cookbook that's been written to go along with it. It's called the Little House Cookbook, and that's where this recipe came from. Not difficult to make, and one pretty easy that you can do with your kids. They mention several different kinds of food in there. They even mention how to make your own butter, which would be a perfect one to go along with your corn dodgers if you eat them warm. These are good with a really big pot of ham and beans, don't you think? Okay, so C.S. Lewis. How many of you have read the Chronicles of Narnia? Did you guys read them?
We did. We did.
We did too, and I still remember we actually tried this. This is Turkish Delight. The White Witch came along and she offered the Turkish Delight to the kids. And Turkish Delight is something you find in a lot of different places, but if you can't, it's a good candy making recipe. A little complicated, not something you want to try with little kids. So you need a candy thermometer in order to make it. It's a jelly type of candy. Did you want to try one?
Oh, sure.
It's a jelly type of candy, has pistachios in it. It's made with fruit juice, and the white on the outside is powdered sugar. So basically, you're lining a pan with powdered sugar, you're making this mixture, and then you're pouring it into the powdered sugar and then covering the top of it again. So it gets a little messy, doesn't it?
It's very messy. It's very good. It's very sweet.
But if you like, we actually did this. We did a Bible school one summer. We wrote our own curriculum using the Chronicles of Narnia and the Family Guide to Narnia, and this was one of the things that we tried with the students there. Okay, now on a more contemporary note, Star Wars is one of the hottest things out there, right?
Right.
But there are a lot of books too that are Star Wars books. So if you're reading the books with your kids or you're going to the movies and you're talking about the characters, you can still use movies as a literature study. You can talk about the genre, you can talk about the characters, the plot. You can talk about all of those things. You can talk about literary elements within that movie. This is something, just kind of a fun thing that we threw in. I don't know how much learning value it has as much as it's just a fun thing to do. These are called Obi-Wantons, and basically they're made out of eggshell wrappers. This is my rendition of R2-D2, and here we have Yoda, and this recipe is basically wonton skins or egg roll wrappers. Cut the shapes that you want, and after they bake, pop them in the oven for 5 to 6 minutes. Brush them with olive oil and sprinkle them with your favorite topping. Poppy seeds, sesame seeds. You can do like a seasoned salt. You can do Parmesan cheese. I did sesame seeds on part of them, and I did just plain garlic powder on some of the others. You can eat them plain. You can eat them with the hummus that you made in another unit. Or with your favorite dip, whatever you would like to do. But these are just kind of a fun thing we thought we would throw in. And there are actually a couple of cookbooks out with ideas on things that you can do to go along with the Star Wars theme, which is where this came from, was one of those cookbooks. I believe it's called Wookiee Pies. So one that you might want to try if you're a Star Wars person. Now, there's no reason in the world that all of this cooking has to stay in the kitchen. Maybe you're a family that goes outside. Maybe you like to go camping. Maybe you camp in your backyard. This is something that we did with our kids when we were little. This is something that your children can do. You can do it if you want to and just do it for nighttime dinner. But we called these foil dinners. I learned to make them when I was in Girl Scouts. Sheet of aluminum foil, meat patty in the middle, and vegetables of your choice. Wow, can you smell that garlic?
Ooh.
I am a garlic person. I put garlic on everything. And we put in fresh carrots and chopped up potato and some onions and peppers, little salt and pepper to taste. Wrap it back up in the foil. If you're outside, throw it in the edge of the fire for about 45 minutes and dinner is ready, but the kids got to help. We've done this with buffalo meat. We've done this with ground beef. We've done it with chicken breasts. You can throw in your favorite veggies. Maybe you're not a carrot and potato person. Maybe you're more of a broccoli, asparagus kind of person. A little drizzle of olive oil helps it too. You'll notice that I like olive oil and I use it on a lot of things. So cooking doesn't have to stay in the kitchen, or your fun ideas for outside food. Another one I mentioned to Deanne, when my kids were little, we did pie irons, something you can find in camping stores, and there are cookbooks for cooking when you're outside. We would take the pie irons, which are cast iron plates, and you use pieces of bread and pie filling, and you'd put the bread in there, put your pie filling on, put another piece of bread, and close that pie iron, hold it over the fire, and it would toast, and all of that bread would come off of the edges because it would burn off. And then when it was finished, you'd open it up and you'd have this little hot pie made with bread and pie filling. Easy to do. Pie irons are still available all over in camping stores and camping departments. So just kind of a fun thing to do that the kids can do with a little bit of parental supervision. So don't confine cooking to your kitchen.
Or to roasted marshmallows outside.
That's
There's
right.
so many other things you can do than just roasted marshmallows.
Cooking outside is more than s'mores. These are just a few of the ideas that you can use along with your curriculum just to spice it up a little bit and to help get the fire of your creativity burning. You can look on a lot of different places. There are cookbooks available to help you with ideas in all of these different areas. There are also internet sites that can help you, such as foodtv.com, or there's also cooking.com, and a lot of others that can help you. I know I have an account at All Recipes because I'm always trying something new. You can also subscribe to magazines that would help you. Not necessarily just cooking magazines, but a lot of kids magazines have good ideas for incorporating food in them. I started cooking when I was very young out of necessity, but it's something I grew to love, and I have been cooking ever since. I'm always trying new recipes, always getting new cookbooks and trying new websites. I know a lot of people go to Pinterest to get ideas. This is where my daughter-in-law spends a lot of time, and I will tell you that that's something, that love of cooking has rubbed off on my own kids, and I think with Deanne it's the same case. We both like to cook, our kids like to cook, and we hope it's something that you can pass on to your children. Because things that are taken in through the senses, not just feeling and hearing and seeing, but smelling and tasting, will help create those memories and help them to remember things that they have learned. So for Cooking in the Classroom, I'm Donna.
I'm Deanne.
Wishing you fun in the kitchen and food for thought.